You've probably heard of the movie Wolf of Wall Street, and you probably have a certain impression of what it's like to work in finance. So yeah, Hollywood high finance, actual high finance, kind of a different thing. Hi, I'm Gorick Ng, Harvard career advisor and recovering investment banker.
Recovering? Uh-oh.
And these are the unspoken rules of Wall Street. What does it take to succeed on Wall Street? It all comes down to a term that sociologists call studied informality. It means that you're able to apply this particular upper middle class way of speaking and conducting yourself that has you coming across as smart, but not a know-it-all.
That means don't show off, just in case you're wrong.
Motivated, but not threatening.
Don't go around punching holes in people's parachutes, basically.
And cool, but not a tryhard.
Try hard not to be cool. Got it.
So these unspoken rules are unspoken. I mean, people talk about how it's important to have corporate polish.
Fleece vest, check. Pastel shirt, check.
Or it's important to have culture fit. Or as one person told me, you just have to get it. What does it mean to get it? Well, I remember one of my managers was talking to a colleague of mine and he said, you know, I'll tell you when I see it. That's not helpful, but it really does matter. And it came down to me looking left, looking right, observing how people conduct themselves, and then emulating them accordingly.
If you want to be somebody, if you want to go somewhere, you better wake up and pay attention. Sister Act 2.
I remember it was one of my first meetings and I was not expected to speak. In fact, one of those unspoken rules is to be
just like a Victorian child,
seen but not heard. Or if you're on a conference call where you have the chief financial officer, the CFO of a company, and the head of your investment banking team talking on the phone, you have two people talking and then you have like 100 people listening, all scrambling to take notes. So I was not expecting to be speaking at all until someone looked over at me and said, Gorick, tell me about those numbers. My heart sank. I was nervous. And so what I did was I ended up speaking at a mile a minute because I was so nervous that I just wanted to get the words out. And then after the meeting, my manager pulled me aside and said, Gorick, the next time you're nervous, speak half as slowly as you would normally speak.
Yeah, like how YouTube lets you adjust video speed. Yeah, you can do that IRL.
Now, if I'm observing a meeting and I see someone
speaking at the equivalent of 2x speed on YouTube,
chances are they're probably more junior.
Or the Ben Shapiro.
If I see them speak at 0.5x speed, chances are they're more senior. No one ever told me these things. I had to look left, look right, and see it for myself. One of the first things that I was told when I got my job on Wall Street is that this is actually not Wall Street. This is Midtown Manhattan.
Okay, then I'm definitely lost.
Wall Street has changed a lot over the last number of decades, where before it was in fact where all of America's biggest banks were headquartered. But after 9/11, these banks started sprawling their way across Manhattan and beyond. Now it's more of an idea.
Ah, like the Tooth Fairy or Dollar Pizza.
Wall Street means finance. And if you're really an insider, it means finance. It means deals. It means transactions. So I still remember I was on my first week of training on Wall Street. We called it boot camp. The trainer at the front of the room points to me and says, you there, what is the revenue of this company? I had my Excel spreadsheet out. I looked at the number staring back to me and it said $3,000. So I thought, easy question, $3,000. I was told to speak confidently and that's exactly what I did.
You guys remember rule 2, 45 seconds in?
And then the entire room chuckled. The trainer at the front said, try again and look at the label in that chart. I looked at the little tiny label staring back at me and it said dollars in millions. And I was like, oh, I get it now. It's not $3,000, it's $3,000 times $1 million, which is $3 billion. And this is not an amount of money that you just take out of an ATM. When we were talking about $3 billion, you're talking about buying companies, selling companies, deals, transactions. And so you end up with what people call on the inside, the buy side and the sell side.
All right, everybody, here comes your finance need to know.
So if you think about that Apple stock in your retirement account, well, Apple at one point in time had to hire investment bankers to sell pieces of that company, shares of that company for you and I to buy. Now, it's not just you and I who own those stocks. It's the pension fund, it's your university endowment, and it's investment bankers who sell parts of the company that makes it possible for the rest of us to own a share in that company. And then you've got people who work in hedge funds, in private equity, in venture capital, the buy side. The way I think about it is if you're on the sell side, you're making PowerPoints. If you're on the buy side, you're reading PowerPoints. When you're in a job where you're staring at $3, 3 and then a dollar sign, but it's actually $3 billion, you end up with high stakes, high scrutiny, high urgency, high stress, and probably high egos as well. Things matter when you make a mistake.
More money, more problems.
You move a decimal in the wrong direction, and you've got a massive problem on your hands that can get you fired, your team fired, your entire bank fired. In the financial industry, you also have two fears that plague everybody every single day. The first is FOMO, and the second is this nagging feeling that this doesn't really matter. Here's the reality. If a company like Apple is going to go public, so going to list its stock on the stock exchange for the rest of us to buy, you have deal makers who are all fighting to lead that deal. You really don't want to miss out, which is why if you're on the sell side, so much of your work comes down to pitching, because the higher ups are flying all around the world, having meetings, whining and dining with people so that they become top of mind.
No matter who pays the check, it pays to show your face.
If you're on the buy side, if you're buying companies or shorting companies, you have this nagging feeling that no matter how talented people say you are, that in reality, you're just lucky. And if you flipped enough coins, or if you had enough people flipping coins, eventually you're going to have someone who will flip heads 100% of the time. You'll look at that situation and think, no, they're not an expert coin flipper, they're just lucky. Now, if you think about the buying and selling stocks as this binary outcome as well, where someone is selling the stock for somebody else to buy, somebody's making money and somebody's losing money, it's so hard to deconstruct to what extent you were just lucky versus actually skilled in your profession.
Finance is gambling, and you need to stay lucky.
When you're junior on Wall Street, you get respect by being good at Excel. When you're senior, you get respect by being good with people. And the reality is, the higher up you go, the more you become a salesperson. The better you are at building relationships, the more likely you are to bring in deals. Because on Wall Street, you bet on a stock if you think it'll go up. You bet on a person if you think that they're going places.
So I'm told bullish essentially means optimistic about a stock or the market. So you're going to want to keep people bullish for you.
If you think about who is going to be selected for that next CEO role, it's not going to be someone who's going to apply on Indeed or on LinkedIn. That person has already been identified and is already being groomed. That's how things really work.
Be a people person, people.
Before I got my job on Wall Street, I thought that this land of Wall Street is this mythical place of sorcery. It wasn't until I showed up in my job that I realized that unless you're a quant and you're actually using calculus in your job, you know everything that you need to know from middle school math. But it's riled up in jargon that makes it incomprehensible to the outside world. So you end up hearing phrases like suggest operational efficiencies in the face of market headwinds. Not the economy's bad, so save more money so you have more money, and by the way, go fire some people.
In finance, it's not what you say, it's how you say it.
So there's an indirect way, and then there's how we actually communicate. I could still remember this one time I had spent all night on an Excel spreadsheet. My Excel spreadsheet had refed out, which no one likes in the financial industry. It just means that your model is broken and you've got this meeting coming up and you have no idea where those numbers even came from. I was sitting there stone cold because I was deathly worried that my manager's managing manager would look over at me. The managing director looks at the number, squints, and says, let's change that 3.4 to a 4.4. And I'm like, what? Like, you asked me for this sophisticated formula. I spent all night on this, and you just change a number like that? Career advisor and recovering investment banker. There's even a term for a situation like this. SWAG. Scientific wild ass guess. Nobody has the answer because finance is not accounting. Accounting is all about looking backwards at all the numbers that already exist and making sure they add up. Whereas finance is about looking forward, and no one has an idea of what the future holds. You have actually like 12 different ways of saying scientific wild ass guess. Projection, forecast, expectation, guidance, price range, price target, estimate, internal research, market sentiment, data-driven insights, forward-looking estimates. I mean, listen to some business news and chances are you will see one of these 12 synonyms and they all mean the same thing. And oh, by the way, when you have a bunch of scientific wild ass guesses together, you have something called a consensus estimate. All from the shamans of the financial system who are trying to predict where the future could be, when in reality, it's anybody's best guess.
It's not repent the end is nigh, it's reevaluate ahead of downward projection.
So is what separates those who are successful from those who are unsuccessful, does it all come down to just whether they're good coin flippers? Well, if you flip heads once, maybe you're lucky. If you flip heads 100 times over a decade, people start really paying attention. Confidence matters when you're in the financial industry, but confidence can only get you so far. Long term, it's about your track record that really matters. If you're a deal maker, what deals have you led? If you're an investor, what did you invest in? And how much money did you end up returning? Which is also why the people who tend to be the most well-respected on Wall Street tend to be those who are well into their careers. You may have some young guns flexing and talking about how much of a return they made over the last week, but time will tell whether they're actually these skilled or lucky investors.
Sure, fake it till you make it, but you've got to keep making it.
When it comes to competence, it's important to sound smart, but to not overshoot and come across as a know-it-all.
Well, there's that golden rule again. Studied informality.
I could still remember one of my very first job interviews was at a big bank. I was interviewing for the exact same role with the exact same interviewer with the exact same company as a really good friend of mine. He went into the interview room first and he came out sweating. Turns out he had received 5 back-to-back-to-back brain teasers. Those impossible interview questions where the interviewer asks you, how many burritos were sold in New York City in the last year? And what you have to do is look at the other person in the eye, keep a straight face, and do all of this mental math and wizardry, all while staying cool. Meanwhile, I walk into the same room and we had just a great conversation for half an hour. It's important to come across as competent, yes, that, hey, you can trust me to be detail-oriented, to be quick on my feet, but moreover, I'm motivated to learn and we're gonna get along.
No, really, enjoy your interview. I mean, not too much. Be cool.
So banks come in all different shapes and sizes, but regardless of where you work, the hierarchy is generally the same. You've got analysts, associates, VPs, directors, executive directors, managing directors, heads of something, chiefs of something, including the CEO. And you might think that your life gets easier as you go up the hierarchy, when in reality, it's kind of hard wherever you are. When you have an associate job or an analyst job, rolls downhill.
Oh, what he means is, no, wait, yeah.
Someone, somewhere, a partner, a managing director, ends up selling the world and then expecting you to deliver on the world. That's when they're in your inbox at 5 p.m., just as you are hoping that you could go on that date, with this disingenuous phrase, hey, don't spend all night on this, but I need this by 7 a.m. the next morning.
Make the deadline, even if it takes you all night.
Now, at that point, you might think, gee, it's great if you're up top. Wrong. Well, number one, that assumes that you've made it to the top. It's hard to make it up to the top. And when you are up at the top, you're not just answering to your manager. You don't necessarily have a manager at that point, but you're answering to your team. You're answering to your clients. You're answering to your shareholders. So the reality is everybody has a boss. It just depends on what title they hold.
It's turtles, all the way down.
One key way that Wall Streeters demonstrate their commitment and compatibility is through the coffee chat. The coffee chat may or may not actually involve coffee, but it all centers around the same structure. It's a 30-minute phone call or in-person conversation where the first 5 minutes is all about the small talk, where you talk about where you're coming from and bonus points if you went to the same school, studied the same program, worked at the same prior firm. The middle 20 minutes where you flex your commitment and competence by talking about what you've worked on, all the research that you've done, how much of an interest you have in their job and their firm. The last 5 minutes are all about talking about next steps. And if you've done those first 25 minutes well, it will always end in the same manner, which is, hey, how about you send me your resume and I'll forward it along and we'll be in touch, which is code for ding, you've succeeded in your interview before the interview. And so before the process even kicks off, I'm going to get someone behind the scenes to fast track you to a final round conversation.
You could be in an interview right now.
That's how people get jobs. Sure, there's the portal, but there's also a side door. And those side doors come in these coffee chats. When it comes to this corporate polish, this thing that we can't quite put our fingers on, doesn't come down to just how you speak. It also comes down to how you look and how you dress. Things have gotten a bit more informal over time, as is the case with every industry. You went from suits and ties to suits without ties, to dress shirts with ties, to dress shirts without ties, to dress pants, to khakis. There's a uniform for Wall Street as well. In fact, insiders love to joke about it so much that there's an Instagram account called Midtown Uniform, where someone goes up and down the streets of New York and takes pictures of the current attire of Wall Street, which is dress shirt, khakis, and of course, a vest.
Invest in vests.
So yeah, there's a uniform. There's a certain way of dressing, certain brands that people will wear, certain styles as it relates to their collars and the fit and the fabric and the color that can mean the difference between someone looking at you and thinking, oh yeah, you get it, and someone thinking, you're trying a little too hard there, try again. Hollywood high finance is nothing like actual real high finance or high finance. Drugs, they exist. Coke, Adderall, all those things, yeah, they exist, but the data doesn't necessarily show that they exist more in finance than, let's say, in any other industry. However, the parties, yeah, they can get pretty expensive and lavish, but there are also a lot of nerds on Wall Street as well, especially if you're talking about the quants who are, again, looking at calculus and crunching numbers all day long. The reality of the job is, yeah, you're commuting to work, you're taking the train, you're walking down the street. You're not taking a private jet. Like any job, you're going to have good days, you're going to have bad days. And in the financial industry, so much of how much of those good days you have versus bad days comes down to who you work for and where you work. In fact, if you go on Google and you search for investment banking sweatshops, you'll get an actual list.
Oh, wait a minute. Hold on a sec. Oh, yeah.
And if you happen to work at one of these companies, you've got an instant conversation starter at every party as long as you hold this job. Because everyone's going to ask you, well, wait, you work there? Is it really as bad as people say it is?
Yeah, avoid the sweatshops.
But no matter where you work, your good days versus your bad days, they'll all follow certain patterns. What does a good day look like? Well, it begins the prior day, where you got home at a reasonable hour, and you looked at your calendar and there's nothing in sight, which means no fire drills, at least as far as the eye can see. And the eye can only see as far as the next minute, so it could change, but so far we're off to a good start. You wake up in the morning and no unread emails. Maybe in that case, you also realize that your manager is away for the summer. There are no live deals and things are a little bit slow. So you might go to the gym, you might grab an extended breakfast, you may even grab a coffee chat, and you might roll into the office at 9:30, 10 a.m. Check your email a bit. You show your commitment by asking if anybody needs help. Ideally, people say no. And your staffer comes along or someone you worked with previously emails you and asks you to update some numbers. It's a model that you made, so there are no skeletons in the closet that you know of or that you don't know of, which is the really bad part. And things are going smoothly. It's 5 p.m. and there are no fire drills. It's complete silence. You may even get to go for dinner. You then hang around and maybe leave at about 9 p.m. It's a good day. Now, what about those bad days? They start the day before. Maybe you were up the prior night until 4 a.m. Maybe you rolled into the office at 7 a.m. because you've got a conference call with someone in another time zone. Maybe you haven't even gotten to the office and your email inbox is already blowing up because that Excel model is broken, that pitch is getting rescheduled, that meeting that you thought was happening next week is happening in 15 minutes. Someone is calling in sick or has an interview or a coffee chat, but has a dentist appointment and you're taking over and you're feeling the walls close in on you even before the day begins. You're jumping around from Excel spreadsheet to PowerPoint presentation to conference call to meeting, and everything is urgent and everything was due yesterday. And then you hand in your work and you're feeling triumphant, and then you realize it's another fire drill because it's hurry up and wait. Because this person that you thought would be available isn't available because they're on flight, but you don't have time to commiserate over that. You've got another assignment that was already due 15 minutes ago. It's 5 p.m. You think the day is winding down. You get another email and another email and another email. You text your date. You say you've got to reschedule. You text your friends. You say you can't party tonight. And it's 9 p.m. and those automatic lights in the office start turning off because they assume that everybody's out of the office except for you. Half an hour goes by. You get a tap on your shoulder. Someone says, "Excuse me." It's the cleaning crew coming over. You swivel your feet to the right to let them in, to pull out the trash can from under your desk. They empty it. And while you're at it, you stand up and you wave so that those automatic lights turn back on. You grab some coffee, you go downstairs. The pitch deck isn't anything like what you had sent to them. It's delayed by several hours. Someone else is sending you an email now, even though it's 1:30 a.m. in the morning. People are wondering if you're still up. You've got to respond and say, "Yes, I am." It'll be in your inbox in 5 minutes. And before you know it, it's 5 a.m. and you're back in the office the following day. That's a bad day. If you're not doing those coffee chats and meeting those people and hunting for that next high-profile assignment, you may not hear about it up front, but you will find out about it. You'll get an email one morning from a colleague who says, "As some of you know, this is my last day. I'll be joining this firm starting at this time. I look forward to staying in touch." Here's the reality of Wall Street. You're always looking for that next opportunity. It's how the industry works. If you're in private equity, hedge funds, venture capital, your job is to hunt for opportunities. If you're a financier, no matter where you are, you're hunting for that next role, hunting for that next career building opportunity, hunting for that next foothold in your career. People are doing it. You may just not hear about it until it's too late.
The golden rule in the Mafia is not to talk to law enforcement. Any kind of conversing with them is a death sentence.
Okay, so I'm dead.
Starting off with an easy one. Snitches get stitches, right?
Hey everybody, I'm John Alite. I'm an old enforcer for the Gambino family. And these are the unspoken rules of the Mafia.
6 shell casings were on the pavement of East 46th Street, right next to the body of Paul Castellano Sr., the top mafiosi in the United States, the heir to the Gambino family, indeed, the son-in-law of the late Carlo Gambino.
What happens next and who's in charge? Who is going to take over an empire of dirty money and power built on drugs, flesh peddling, violence, and intimidation?
I started, I guess, about 17, 18. And I worked my way up to the more serious things as I got into my 20s, into murder and some violent acts. And I was a strong arm for our family. You know, as a kid, I started picking up the rules of the Mafia from a childhood. It's like going to kindergarten, working your way up. It was just a natural process.
Remember your ABCs, kids. Assault, battery, and crime.
Like a school-educated kid, you start off with letters, and today's letter A. And it's the same aspect with the mob world. We watch how a guy gets up and he excuses himself from a table before he moves along because of the trust factor and the respect factor for the boss.
The Mafia are a jumpy sort. Don't give them an excuse.
I started learning little things like that, not so much words either. A lot of times, you know, I try to tell families and kids, it's not what comes out of your mouth, it's the way you handle yourself, the way you walk and the way you're moving, your movements. And kids, you know, copy that, whether your own children or, you know, friends of yours or their family members.
Don't be suspicious, don't be suspicious.
As a young kid, we were in a schoolyard and we watched a guy running through the schoolyard. A bunch of guys were chasing him and they came from every direction. They caught the guy and they started batting him to death. The language from these guys, you rat bastard and you snitch, and you know, so obviously we know he was talking to the police.
And I thought my NDA was airtight.
Later on, after they give him a beating and kill him. Maybe 15 minutes later, a couple guys came back and they grabbed us and they said, you see anything over there? We said, see what? And the guy smirked. And they said, you know, the guy over there, what happened to him? And we said, well, we didn't see anything happen to anybody. So we knew it at a young age. We just knew that in those days, you don't talk, you don't look, you don't pay attention, and what you see, you don't see.
Keep calm and carry on, or else.
Usually the most common use for violence is to impress upon whoever we are, our laws, our rules, our regulations, and to collect money. I mean, we taught pretty young at a young age, don't threaten people, don't talk, just do it.
So that's where Nike found its brand identity.
So there is no, I'm going to hit you over the head with the bat if you don't have the money tomorrow. You're just told you better have that money tomorrow. Because of his actions, there's a reaction from us.
Well, what do you know? Newton's third law of motion.
For me personally, I used a bat a lot, a pipe. Later on, I would use a gun often, and a knife, not as frequent as the bat and guns, but I used a knife also on several occasions. You know, me personally, violence was in my nature. I grew up with it. And as I look back, I made a mistake because I was too violent. And when you're too violent, you're hurting your financial situation.
A representative from Consolidated Rackets Incorporated pays a routine business call.
But cleaning fees aren't cheap with all the bloodstains.
Sometimes when you're using violence, you get used to using it and you're not using common sense. And you're bringing heat on yourself, your family. A lot of law enforcement, they know who you are and that the pressure's going to come on even further because you're very violent.
Don't make the cops' jobs easier.
Now, over the years, you learn to use 10 gears instead of 1 gear on a bike, right? So there's a lot of ways to get the money. But when you're young, immature, and you're looking to be that top gangster, I think you're apt to be a little more violent. Learning respect is, you know, since I'm a kid, again, I was watching the way other guys moved around, the bosses that I was around and with my father in the Bronx. And I'm a child. And the bosses would, you know, put you on their lap. They'd be giving you $100, $50, pat your head. But you're watching, it's not what he's saying. You're watching what the movement of the other guys around him. So when they walk in a room, I'm learning very early on, they don't say hello to my uncle or my father or some other guy. They go directly to the main guy.
Monkey see, monkey do. Monkey won't get pistol whipped.
They shake his hand, kiss him hello. You could see that they walk on eggshells with them. Then they sit down and say hello to the rest of the guys, whoever was in line. It would go by rank, basically. And I learned the same thing. And then over the years, you start learning more and more of these rules.
Every Mafia crime family needs a hangout spot. The Little Rascals had the He-Man Woman Haters Club, or for the Gambino family, this was it. Here they could talk and drink and gamble, as long as they show up on time.
Got to be somewhere. You got to be there 10 in the morning. Gotti would show up at our Bergen Club at about 11. He didn't wake up early. Sometimes he showed up at 12 or even later, but we had to be there about 10. And if you think he doesn't know you're there, you know, you're mistaken. He's very astute about who's around, what's going on. And if you think you're a lower level guy and you don't have to show, he wants you there. He knows who's who. Louis DeBono was making a ton of money. He was huge in the construction industry. And John Gotti wanted to see him. They were trying to reel him in and collect more money than he was putting up. And John asked him to come in, and he refused to come in, which when you're asked to come in, there is no option. There is, well, can I come at 8 o'clock? If you ask them to come at 6, can I come on Thursday? When you ask to come on Tuesday, you just drop whatever you're doing. It's a 24/7 job, and he refused to come in several times. And he asked to meet me and Bobby Borriello. We did a walk talk, which is so we don't get caught on eavesdropping equipment. And we spoke about who's going to hit Louis and where. And it was Kevin McMahon, Charles Cornelia, and Bobby Borriello. They were going to hit him in the garage in the World Trade Center, which happened. And that's where they kill him. Well, time is one of the things. You got to be around for years. You're not just accepted from nowhere. So when you hear, a lot of times you hear, well, how did this guy come around? Meaning myself, I'm Albanian and Italian mob. But I grew up in the life, and I grew up around guys like Andy Ruggiano, whose son Albert was my baseball coach, a good friend of mine, box. together at the Lost Battalion Hall in Queens. You're raised around everybody in that mob world. Everybody knows you since you're a kid. They know your movements. They know your fights. They know you're tough. They know that you have the ability to be a street guy, a gangster, you're violent. So some of the qualities they look for. We were sitting at a table in a diner late at night, and I didn't know the kids, but one of them opened their mouth a little slick to Gotti's son. And I didn't like what he said, and I just reached across the table and grabbed a ketchup bottle and put it across his head.
Break glass in case of hurt feelings.
He started running, and one of the other guys was like, you know, we're friends with him. But I thought it was off color what they said, and they said it in front of a group of people. And I made a judgment call. Maybe he didn't like that he did it, but he smiled at the same time, knowing that if somebody says something or does something to him in front of me, there doesn't have to be words. It's just a look. And, you know, I hurt him. I didn't completely hurt him bad, but I hurt him enough where he understood, don't ever talk like that again in front of me about it. We were raised in a different era in the 80s where we dressed like gentlemen. And it was an image that Gotti wanted to project to the public, that we were not bums. We were successful, classy guys that would protect the neighborhood. And the way we carried ourselves was very important because it was his image. It was his brand he was building. So, you know, when we went in the afternoon to the club, we would have walking suits on. They're basically outfits like a suit like I'm wearing today, but with short sleeves, and they're a jacket and pants set with, you know, loafers. Or we'd wear sweatsuits, but dressy ones.
Dressy sweatsuits? Oh, well, if I can wear them to my cousin's wedding, I'm in.
Back in the day, there were feelers and outfits that matched, that were, you know, money. They weren't, you know, raggy gray sweatpants with a t-shirt. So there was an image he wanted from us. And it wasn't so much verbal, it was, we understood by the way he carried himself, how he wanted us to carry ourselves. The same thing with sunglasses and fast cars, and he didn't want the images of, he would say, pimp. Stop dressing like a pimp, don't drive a pimp's car.
Do not pimp your ride.
He didn't like it. I pull up in a Corvette convertible, everybody started calling me Vets.
Just don't pull up in a Ford Escort.
Although John didn't like it, he did like it. He did the same. He was on speedboats, he wore sunglasses, but he didn't want it to get carried away because he didn't want the appearance of major drug dealers. We also started buying big cars like Lincolns and Benzes, and the Lincolns and the Caddies were big back. Then later on, the Benz started coming in. But these cars were more conservative-looking cars, and they were known to be gangsters' cars. And you'd have several guys that could get it out, in and out, so that, you know, they're 4 doors, they're not 2 doors.
Oh, sure. Who wants to get shot in the back trying to climb into the back seat?
There's always a level of decorum that we were expected to maintain from when he first pulls up with his car to boss. So whoever's there opens the door for him. When we get in the car, he sits in the front, we get in the back seats.
Gotti gets shotty.
When he gets in the car, one of us drive, depending on who he says to drive. When he goes into the club, we walk into the club, and unless he gives you the eyes to get out, or he'll tell you to sit down, or he'll tell you go down the block and get me the barber. Just that morning, did he wake up grumpy? Is he going to come in and give you that dead stare, like, you know, get out of my face today? There's one rule after another, but some of them are untold, some of them are obvious. You don't wear the same clothes as he has. If he has something on that, you know, you notice when he walks in and you say to yourself, oh shit, he's got the same clothes, I gotta go change.
No twinsies.
Where you park your car, you make sure. We used to park in the bank next door.
With the Chase Bank Mafia card, you always have a parking spot, but expect a small fee for body disposal.
The bank obviously liked us there because it was also a protection thing for them. If you're sitting down at the table, we all have already pre-seated positions at that table, that we don't sit in other people's chairs. We know where we sit.
If you don't know where to sit, you're on the wrong table.
We don't eat until he puts a fork in his food first.
Don't even think about grabbing a French fry from his plate.
We don't take a sip of our drink until he takes a sip of his drink. There's no conversation at that table until he starts that conversation.
So basically high school cafeteria popular table rules.
It's not business, mob business. You're inside we're inside a social club. So you're assuming that there's wiretaps in there. So we'll talk about sports. We'll talk about joking around. We'll talk about a television program. beautiful woman that we ran into, just small talk. And then you go outside for your walk talks with whoever you're conducting business with. I mean, listen, the most lucrative business, and, we used to joke about it because you'd see guys making a ton of money. See, man, he's running a lot of numbers because, the numbers business was big back then.
The numbers game, otherwise known as the Mafia lottery, was illegal gambling, bringing in a lot of money and a lot of trouble for anyone who couldn't pay what they owed.
We know it's heroin. It's not numbers.
Well, all right then.
They might have a numbers business, but you're not making that kind of money in numbers. You're not making that kind of money in bookmaking because there's a lot of money in bookmaking. It's impossible to make the billions and trillions of dollars that is made over the years without the drug industry. So when someone tells you not in the drug industry, it's like any other thing. You have to conform to what's movement. If other families are starting to move, you have to, because of the power factor of that money.
Forget that the Mafia is historically anti-drugs. It's about the money, people. Come on.
Over time, everything changes because you had prohibition. And there was a ton of money being made in the liquor industry. It was basically a drug business with liquor. So when the legalization of alcohol came in, something needs to take its place. And that was the drugs, whether it was cocaine and became heroin. Certain things sell. That's sex, that's drugs, that's liquor, it's nightclub, and there's no limits when it comes to those things. People have addictions, and people, when they're making more money, they want party harder.
Oh, Mafia life sure is a lot like advertising. Wait, is this where we put the ad break in?
Well, you got bosses like, Paul Castellano had Patsy Conti around him that owned all the key foods. He owned supermarkets, he owned key foods, but he was huge in the heroin business. So Paul Castellano was good friends with him. Paul Castellano was completely against drugs. As far as he was concerned, Conti was giving him money from the supermarket industry. We don't know supermarkets that can make that kind of money. So if he has a blind eye to it and he doesn't know anything about it, he doesn't have to enforce the rules of death to anybody that sells it. Some people get special treatment and preferential treatment depending on who you are and what's your relationship with the boss.
Well, not my boss, no. He's sick of us all equally.
Yeah, your loyalty gets tested on a constant basis. When you're in trouble, all the guys that are around you desert you. When you're in trouble, when you're in penitentiaries like I was in a third world country, your partners and friends and gangsters are not coming around to help you.
Look, if you're locked up, you just better make new friends, and fast.
You start seeing, and then they're testifying, giving information with excuses behind it. You start understanding you're not that 20-year-old kid anymore. You're a man that's been to war, that understands what war is about in the street, because we're in war, regardless if it's legal war or not. We're in constant, you're on the fight or flight mode. And, especially if you're in the trenches doing this kind of work.
There's a reason they call Mafia leaders lieutenants.
In the real world, you go to jail. So there's a consequence of breaking rules in the real world. Breaking rules in the mob world, you get killed, you get hurt, you get broken down, and you have no relationship with the mob anymore. I mean, in the 70s and 80s, it was a very, very serious life, the mob. I mean, we're very stringent in the rules. There was no bending any of these rules. There wasn't as maybe he's cooperating, or maybe this guy's talking, or maybe this guy. There would be, if there was a maybe behind any of that, if there was any kind of question mark, just go kill him.
All right, shoot first, ask questions later. Actually, forget the questions.
It was done that quickly in those days. That's changed completely. You definitely don't put your hands on another member of your family. And that happens now, and that would be a death sentence. And you have guys from other crews threatening other crews, and that would be a death sentence. So there's so many things that today they do, and they're openly using drugs. They're getting caught pimping young girls underage, and there's no consequences. There's no death sentence. If you bring somebody around and he's cooperating or wear a wire, you're responsible for that individual, just like Sonny Black was years ago. Those days are gone. So whoever's believing in the existence of the Godfather in modern time mafia is insane. I've always said my own personal rules is you're loyal to who's loyal to you. I was very violent, but I chose my rules. My rules were I weren't going to kill any kids. John Gotti's brother, Vinny Gotti, a woman belittled Pete Gotti at the Kennedy Inn. And Vinny Gotti, because he's
a nut job,
not respected, he was insecure. John Gotti himself didn't care for his brother, broke his collarbone earlier. He killed her, wrapped her up in a carpet and threw her in a garbage can. Now, this is the same guy that his brother, John, made me go up to Eastern Nappaneck prison, and he got his chain taken off him. And John told me to go see him in the 80s and tell him if he doesn't get that chain back, he's going to break his neck again like he did the other time. And he wasn't man enough to keep it, and he wasn't man enough to get it back. And he embarrassed the Gotti family on several occasions. That's one. It's embarrassment, it's a disgrace, it's something that's a low life. We're supposed to be killing the guys that are killing women. And when you start crossing that line, you're not the mafia anymore. You had guys like Tommy Karate, that Bonanno family, that chopped up a woman and killed her. To me, this is not normal behavior. This is not gangster behavior. This is serial, something psychologically wrong behavior. I've known what I've done over the years, so could I do it? Yeah, I'm definitely capable of doing that. Would I like to do that? Not at all. Well, trivial rules like sunglasses, because I wear them, right? People want to see your eyes, and people say to you, well, I want to see if he's full of shit or something, because they want to see your eye movement. They want to see, why you're covering your eyes. What's the reason behind the glasses? Now, Gotti used to say that a lot. Take those, can I curse on him? Sure. Take those glasses off. He says only rats wear them. But then you'll see him in pictures with glasses on. So, but he doesn't mean exactly what he's saying. What he's saying is, I want to see what you're saying to me by looking in your eyes.
Come on, don't be shady.
In the morning, it's a sunny day. You want to go to the beach, right? And then you realize you compromise your life. There is no beach, without permission. The average day was you get dressed, you show up at the 99th Street, 101st Avenue. You'd go to Richie's Cafe. That was Gotti's other brother. He had a little cafe around the corner. We'd go sit there. We'd have an espresso or something. And then we go around the corner to a diner. This guy, a Greek guy, had it. Nice guy, Nick. We go eat something. And then you start bullshitting with the guys, whoever's there, the up-and-coming guys, the guys that grew up with our regime of guys. And we break balls with each other, laugh, wait for the father to show up, maybe get a shave, go to the corner, get our nails done. We were always in the nail salon because it was also next door. On the weekends, we'd have a family dinner, meaning the Gambino family members and associates would be at the main table with Gotti. And then some of the other guys would sit either in the kitchen or in a small little table, or in the same room. Sometimes we'd set up another table for them. And we go about our day after that, and guys would come in from every crew and pay homage to Gotti and talk whatever they needed to talk, messages. And that was our day on a usual, besides if we'd run out and go to the track, go to OTB, go to the casinos. If we left the neighborhood, we'd go to Atlantic City or one of those casinos. Either we'd drive down Mosa, once in a while we took helicopters. That was just a regular routine of breaking each other's chops, laughing. And it was a good time at the same time because of the camaraderie of it. And we'd talk about schemes of making money. And then sometimes we'd walk down, like I said, to Joey Scopo's club and go see some of his guys because it wasn't far off. And if Gotti came, somebody would beep us and tell us he wants you back. Well, we'd go to JoJo's club once in a while because, we're all same crew. Even though it's different factions, especially back then, they didn't all get along. Later on, John gets more friendly with them. But at first, they couldn't even come down and see John. It's the way you move. It's the way you carry yourself. It's not so much what you say. It's that slickness. We've been in the street our whole lives. We know who's a street guy. We know the way you dress. We know the way you walk. We know that, you either have that swagger or you don't. Whether you have money or you don't have money, you got to carry yourself as a success. And I think that's in general in life. It's, how you dress, how you tip, your mannerisms. You're not a big mouth. You're not loud. You're polite to waiters, waitresses, hosts, you know, wherever you go to a Broadway show. And the insecure guys are always loud because they're not, those are the guys that'll tell you who they are and what they are and pretend to have, you know, they'll wear 100 chains around their neck and watches because they're insecure guys are not secure enough to know they're not man enough to carry that position. Whether you're Spanish, black, white, Indian, or any, or a gangster, or a gang member, or a biker. If you're street smart, you understand, and you can read through all this crap.
Most of the gangsters do not live in suburban opulence, but in areas like Mulberry Street at the toe of Manhattan. For their own survival and the survival of their organisation, they remain in the relatively safe havens where their fathers and grandfathers grew up.